it's difficult. Hopefully a more robust collaboration, like Dr. Madan was saying, and not to be in our silos, but to work together as a community. Because we could really answer a lot of the questions that are out there, and if we have a tight-knit group, we can design studies rapidly, we can go through our individual IRBs and then enter patients in really kind of a rapid fashion. So that would be a nice thing to work toward. And then the question of EMS diversion or not is a tough one, because
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Yes. I'll try. So diversion is a tough question because within the Kaiser system, we've looked at our stroke patients and kind of modeled what would happen with diversion versus without diversion. And it turns out that with diversion, 90% of patients end up not having any kind of endovascular treatment. And so the question is, I'm not saying that people get inadequate care, but do you divert everybody for the 10% of people who end up benefiting from that? And right now, I think that's an unanswered question, but maybe that's something that we can collaborate on and try to answer. So I think that looking down the line, there are some major developments happening and major questions that still need to be answered, but hopefully we can work together to answer them.
Thank you very much. We will move on to Sutter Health Program Director, Dr. Richard Atkinson.
Is this working? Yeah. So I first apologize for coming a little late and having my name called out twice. That was not my publicity stunt. I felt I was in the 5th grade and my teacher was telling me my homework had been turned in late. Okay, so I'm at Sutter. I wanted to respect what you asked for initially, but probably wander. What we're doing at Sutter right now, we're trying to get our TPA times down to really tight. Time is brain, everybody's heard that. The window is about 4.5 hours, and so we're very, very tough on that. We are developing our ability to be certified as a comprehensive stroke center. That's all in the works. I personally am in charge of I have 7 basic primary stroke centers under my purview right now. And the issue is, how do we move patients around when they can't get intervention? So these are the things I'm looking at. We're also looking at urgent MRI scanning to determine size of stroke and determine whether we can treat it beyond the typical windows. But the future can be very soon, I think, and I want to give you a scenario, and I'll use the name of some hospitals and systems, not to the point, just because they're convenient or in the county. So let's say you have a stroke in Galt, which I believe is in South Sacramento County. Is that right? Okay. It's not Lodi, right? So, okay, so with Galt. So the window for a stroke treatment with TPA is 4.5 hours. So let's say you have a stroke in Galt, and you call 911, and closest primary stroke center is probably Methodist Hospital, I believe. And let's say you get there within an hour and a half of your stroke onset. You're eligible for TPA, you can get that. And then if it turns out you need intervention, you can probably be transported quickly to either Mercy General or Mercy San Juan, whatever the system wants to do a thrombectomy. I think if you have a stroke in Galt right now at 1 hour, the issue of diversion, for those of you that don't quite understand what we're talking about, is bypassing Methodist and taking you to a center that can do intervention, even though, as Dr. Hartman pointed out, the majority of those patients will not turn out to be eligible for intervention. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but let me give you this scenario. I'm in Galt and I have a stroke at 4 hours. I'm not going to get anything in Methodist because I'm not eligible for TPA. And I'm making this as a rough estimate. What if instead of stopping at Methodist, the paramedics were empowered at a stroke that they believe is a stroke is beyond the treatment window at a given hospital to go to the next hospitals. Now, as it turned out, that patient would have the selection of UCD, Sutter, or Mercy to get potential thrombectomy. So this is a wider window, and with the treatment mentioned from Prague, the trial, we may be looking at up to 24 hours. So I would like us to see, not go down too hard on this very early paramedic analysis of where the patient could go, with a lot of training required to do it. And instead, look at the windows. If you are not likely to get treatment at one hospital, just as Charles, I think, had at Bear Valley, although it told him Jackson now could treat him. Thanks to the Heart Association, it's a primary stroke center. So that's really what I think is the next step, is working with EMS to see, are we ready to think about keeping patients in the system? Is Kaiser ready to do this? Is Sutter ready to do this? To take the patient from their smaller hospital like Jackson or Auburn that I have, and instead of stopping there, if they're already at 4 hours, bring them on down to Sutter Roseville or to Sutter downtown. Not based on any particular examination, but based on the diagnosis of stroke outside the TPA window. So you're eager to say something. And I'm hoping that's where we head right now. And I didn't know this was going on in Santa Clara, but I heard that, and it was like, well, geez, he just took my little talk. Because I think that's what we should be looking at in Sacramento, is not stopping at a small hospital. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've been in conversations with the stroke directors as well, like with EMS, so for the rest of the audience, there has been dialogue about this for months. But I was just going to say just that, to really go off of what you're suggesting. In the EMS community, the big conversation has been around what scale, is there a scale that can distinguish between a large vessel stroke that would go to a comprehensive versus not, that would go to a primary, and of course there's not a great scale to do that. And that's what other EMS agencies outside the state have been piloting, other states. That's what LA's doing, but that's why I made that mention that Santa Clara's program is novel for that very reason. So they're using the BFAST scale, but if your onset of symptoms is between 3.5 and 6 hours, they're going to go comprehensive.
Right.
For kind of that reason. If you're not, if you're before or after, you go to a primary. And so they're doing it based on time.
I think the beauty of this is, number one, you're not demanding a lot from your paramedic, which remains to be validated, as you know. How often do they say you have the type of stroke that ought to go to intervention? How often is that true? That's a very hard job to do. Number two, you're running into politics. And are you taking a patient out of one system and putting them in another? The beauty of this you can stay in the system. You can go to Kaiser, you can go to Mercy, you can go, and you don't ask the paramedic to do anything but diagnose a stroke and the onset time, which they're perfectly capable of doing. So if people understand what I was proposing, that's really what I would propose as being a rational step for Sacramento County. And it may still need work, I'm not saying.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge in the evolution is you just mentioned that study that showed potential benefit to 24 hours out. So now is the Santa Clara policy already outdated because it only goes to 6 hours? Should it be? But so it's so evolving that, yes. Yeah. And this is probably for a smaller group anyway, but it's a fascinating conversation, and it's so interesting to see the care of an acute medical condition evolve so quickly.
Before we move on, could you just say a couple more sentences about what you're proposing?
Oh my God. I didn't know, I had no idea what I was going to do today, and I don't have a specific proposal, but as Dr. Garcon mentioned, we have had some sub-rosa conversations about this issue of diversion, and I personally don't think the science is there yet for us to be taking patients and bypassing patients who could have gotten treated for the most part at the hospital we just bypassed. So my proposal is that the systems of us and our CEOs get together with EMS and talk about, in the light of what's going to come out when the trials are published toward the end of the summer, I think, of consider bypassing, if it's agreeable to the systems, to bypassing the smaller hospital that will not institute treatment for the stroke that is happening. Is that enough of a proposal? It's better than I gave my wife. It's longer.
Do you want to have bypass?
Oh my God, who do do I want bypassed? So here, let me play it perfectly within my system. If you have a stroke in Bear Valley, you're past 4 hours or 3 hours, should you bypass Sutter Amador, which is my hospital up in Jackson, and come right down to me? That's what we're confronting. And I don't know what Sutter Jackson Amador will say. I don't know what Roseville and Sacramento will say, but that's what I'm looking at. Why stop at Sutter Davis at 4 hours? Why not come on downtown? So that's what I'm doing. And I can do that in my system, maybe. I don't think I can do it though without EMS support. And Davis is YOLO anyway, so it's another.
But Sutter downtown is Yolo County's stroke center.
Right, but what I'm saying is, can I skip Sutter Davis? Now, of course, the CEO will flatten my tires, but I think that's what we're up against. We have to treat the patient well, and if you have a stroke in Woodland, and you go to Woodland or Davis, the question is, gee, if you're out of the window for TPA, should we be moving into town? That's as good as I can do.
Clearly we have 4 major medical groups sitting at the table here. Each of those groups, now that we have new information about interventions in strokes, could designate their comprehensive center, and a patient, as you said, within the system could identify whether they're in the Sutter, Dignity, UC Davis, or Kaiser system, and go to, in the EMT, could make a decision to shift them directly to the comprehensive center where they can get that type of a therapy. And there is information that that therapy would be potentially better than IV therapy in those cases for improvement in functional class at 30 days and 90 days out, which is the most important thing, to have a functioning patient 3 months out. So yeah, I think that would be a potential direction that all of the systems could sit down in a room, agree on, meet with the local CMS for the county, and come to an agreement on without a lot of disagreement for that. Dr. Ng is going to present his 3 minutes hot start and 3 minutes cool down projections.
Sure. Can you hear me? Yeah. So, I think one of the things that is really obvious when we talk about stroke care is that it is a moving target. Like when we think about acute care, but that's changed over the last 15 years, 20 years. It's kind of evolved from TPA to vascular therapy, from being 3 hours to 4.5 hours to 6 hours, to now thinking about thrombectomies up to 24 hours out. And that's something that when we think about stroke care in general, it's something that, at least from my standpoint, at UC Davis, we like to think about that patient from the time they enter the hospital to the time they leave the hospital, to 6 months out to a year out. So, outside of what these guys all mentioned, which is what we would do at UC Davis in general, is that I would like to mention that acute care is a moving target. But at the same time, when we think about rehabilitation and recovery from a stroke, that's also a moving target. After somebody actually has had a stroke, only about 25% of the people are eligible for TPA. And most of those people don't even get TPA. And about 10% of people, of the total people that come in, are eligible for a thrombectomy. And as Dr. Hartman mentioned, and Dr. Maydon has mentioned, that some of those people don't actually get thrombectomy, given the circumstances of where they end up. And that's one of the major issues where we are trying to work out where these patients should go. With that said, how we think about care after that patient is in the hospital and after they've left the acute setting is an evolving target as well. Okay? A lot of therapies, when we think about therapies in terms of recovery, there are new medications and new developments in that area that allow patients to continue to develop and recover to the point where they're able to actually have a functional outcome. that is beyond what we typically think of somebody with a severe stroke. And that's something that, like, at least at UC Davis, we're working hard at in terms of pushing towards research-wise and the way that we think about post-stroke care. Now, with that said, in terms of where we're thinking about in the next year at UC Davis, we've been operating as a comprehensive stroke center in general at the current moment, and we're going to be applying for comprehensive status by the end of this year. In terms of thinking about where we want to be in terms of like working with these other 3 great institutes, I think Dr. Wolmer mentioned is that, like, as a group, we've been like in talks in terms of working with Dr. Gazon about trying to develop a system where we can actually figure out where these patients should go. The American Heart Association, Smith is here, is going to talk about like Lifeline, Mission Lifeline, which is a tool. It's not really a directive or initiative, but it's a tool that, it's a way of kind of shaping the way that we think about like how to direct patients to their various hospitals in the area. Excuse me, I'm still kind of recovering from a little bit of a cold this weekend, so my voice is a little bit muddled. But as we kind of move forward, like one of my goals, and certainly a goal of like the people on this panel, is to try to work together to kind of understand where our perspectives on like how EMS should be like directing patients to the different hospitals to provide excellent care to the area.
Thank you very much. I have now for the panel 5 questions to roll out. Whether you want to answer individually or not, we can start. And we'll take volunteers, no prisoners, just volunteers for this. The first question is, we have heard that a lot of the EMTs use the Cincinnati diagnostic system as their coding in EMT. And yes, the new parameters allow us to do interventions perhaps out to 6 hours, perhaps out to 24 hours, so it's longer. But still, time is neurons for that period of time. And making a quick or early disposition to the correct place would be helpful. Is the Cincinnati diagnostic system still the best that we can give to our EMTs available today for that, or is there a better system for making the diagnosis in the ambulance? Yes.
So this gets to, this gets a little bit to the trade-off between the accuracy of an assessment and the complexity of the assessment. So you could have a very complex assessment that gives you greater accuracy, but it's also harder to do, harder to train people to do, more variability in between practitioners, and so you end up having a little bit of that trade-off. In terms of the time of it, in the grand scheme of things, that assessment, if it takes, if it takes 30 seconds versus 3 minutes or 5 minutes, that's probably not a huge difference, because by the time people are being treated, we're talking in hours, right? 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. So having a little bit better, more accurate assessment might be a better way to go if it's going to make a decision of this place versus that place, the comprehensive stroke center versus the closest primary stroke center.
Which would you recommend for Sacramento EMS today?
It's a hard question because I'm not involved in the day-to-day working, so the training would be the big question. I think if it's going to really make a decision on where they're going, then a more complex scale might be of benefit. But the practicality of rolling that out would have to be assessed.
Yes, Dr. Atkinson.
So just to add to this, the complexity of the exam reduces its validity because it's harder to do. Most nurses can tell you what a stroke is. They can't tell you where it is and how big it is and what the cause of it is. And when we talk about intervention, we're really looking at the paramedic trying to say, there's a high probability you have a clot in a certain artery. And to me, at this point, looking at all the data in the literature, that is a big leap to start deciding to divert patients on that basis, which is why my own recommendation is, I just want our guys over there to diagnose stroke and figure out the time window. And the data at this point pretty much suggests that it's just about as good to go to the nearest hospital that can treat you, and if you do need intervention and they can't do it, to move them over quickly than to do bypass everyone, where the majority are gonna not be treated anyway. So again, my vote is avoid these complex exams that are going on throughout the country. Pay attention to diagnosing a stroke and get the systems to see if they want to work out this beyond the window diversion issue, which doesn't require a complex exam.
So the question is, what do we give to Dr. Garzon today to give to Sacramento CMS?
What's your
To
hit
make your
rate?
diagnosis.
What's your accuracy rate on diagnosing stroke, do you think? Your paramedics?
From the Cincinnati Pre-Hospital Stroke Scale, it's about what the literature showed, which is 70%. 70%. If the Cincinnati Pre-Hospital Stroke Scale is positive, about 70% likelihood that the patient does have stroke, which is what the stroke scale literature shows for that stroke scale.
We have a question from the back.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm Irina Rubella from Mercy San Juan Comprehensive Center. Quick question, one thing I have not heard us mention for the panel and for the Sacramento EMS is the mention of technology. We started out talking about an app that recognizes stroke for the public, and there's many apps out there and companies that are willing to put apps in ambulances. For example, Pulsera is one of them, that actually will connect all those pieces together. One county in Florida, Broward County, are actually using Pulsera app where they go round robin fashion with the control center and actually accessing the end-all authority for intervention from the field. So they're using, the paramedic will do a preemptive scale quickly and then say, I think this is a large vessel occlusion, access the app and be able to access the interventionist on call that would be able to agree or not. So we haven't really discussed that. We live in a very connected world right now. It's not 20 years ago where trauma and STEMI and everything was happening. We have that capability, so I'm just wondering how we're going to go forward, what the panel and the EMS county is willing to do in looking at that as the missing piece to tie everything together.
Dr. Ng is going to answer that. What do we get for her?
I was actually going to
know something today.
Sure. You know, I think the one thing that I wanted to mention in regards to like looking at the different scales was that like scales are they're just that. They're scales. They're based on numbers. And when you look at the Cincinnati scale or the Ray scale or the Van scale, like they're all, like when you get higher and higher up on the scale, just as you get higher and higher up on the NIH stroke scale, the likelihood of having a large vessel occlusion actually increases significantly. So, like, when you are already using a scale that is based in numbers, when you get towards that higher severity number, that likelihood of having a cortical, like, function to that, cortical dysfunction to that patient, meaning that there is a higher likelihood of having a large vessel occlusion, increases significantly. So, when we're already using something like the Cincinnati stroke scale, and they're scoring at the max number, their likelihood of having a large vessel occlusion is probably very high. And thinking about whether you want to divert that patient it becomes less of an issue when you know that they're not able to talk and not able to use their arm. So then at that point, then does it make sense to actually send that patient to just a primary stroke center, or to send it to a center that actually has the capability of doing vascular therapy? So, like, even though we talk about like scales in the sense that well, it's a scale that we're using, but that is still, in that sense, like it's still, like it can still be validated for a large vessel occlusion. Okay. So, in regards to the second question regarding, what was that question again?
There's apps out there that actually are free for EMS rigs.
just on the basis of an iPhone or an iPad that belongs to the rig, that you can access, the medic can access and instantly have a connection with a video feed with the neurologist or the interventionist that could be on call
Sure.
for the region, that would verify and validate, say, yes, I agree, this patient should be diverted.
Yeah, there have been, like, from what I understand, like, that's in Florida, or is that?
Broward County is already using that. One of the apps is called Pulsera. There's many counties that are, and then they're using that as the missing piece to say, yes, we all come together, we agree on this. We're not gonna let the paramedic make that final decision.
Sure.
The interventionalist will say, yes, I believe this may be a lot less with
I think
cushion.
that is I think these guys could all comment on that, but that's probably based on like a hospital resource issue, like whether there is a neurologist or somebody in the ED that was able to help with making that diagnosis. Certainly, like in Texas and Houston and in Cleveland and in Florida, when they're using a mobile CT unit to go and look at these stroke patients outside, they're being validated with the neurologist on board and a tele-neurologist like on top of that. So if we were able to at some point have the resources to do something like that, that would certainly be possible. So I know
Yeah. One last comment, if I may. It's a great idea, and that opens a whole other avenue as opposed to just using a scale. So I think down the line, that's probably where things will go. It does take a lot of coordination and figuring out who is the appropriate person to call. But I think it's very doable. And I was just thinking that one sort of corollary that we've been doing is when we have an inpatient stroke alert, it's often a hospitalist who's the first person who's there. And they'll use FaceTime and get the teleneurologist on their iPhone and, it's not as great an exam as you can get in person or even with a telemedicine card, but it's a quick examination. And the teleneurologist can say, I think this is a stroke versus I think not, or, give some direction to the hospitalist and the nurse who are there with the patient. So I think down the line, that's likely where things are going to evolve.
Second question I had was, there's a lot of, we'll get you in a second, but there's a lot of women in the room. It takes almost twice as long to get women into treatment for strokes as men. Could you comment on that and how we can correct that? Anyone on the panel?
I'm not touching on that.
That's the problem on the panel, right?
Where does that come from? What number, where are you getting?
I'll give you that number. That is an American Heart Association released information. It takes approximately twice as long to get women to treatment, presumably because the diagnosis, I don't know, I was going to ask.
Is it from the onset time? Because a lot of men have wives, and the wives call 911. A lot of women don't have husbands, and there's no one to call 911.
Or they do have
So, and the husband doesn't call 911. That was it. So I'm not sure if that's from onset time, the treatment, versus, but if you come in the emergency department with a stroke, I don't know why it goes slower because of your female. That makes sense.
There was similar literature for myocardial infarction.
But they had different symptoms, didn't they?
That was
Women?
part of it. No, but even with chest pain and diagnosed by EKG, a lower percentage of women actually went to acute PCI, and it became an awareness thing. I mean, I think it's a complicated question because there's too many variables to know why.
And I would also just say there's what we like to call the casserole factor, which is when a woman feels sick, she might stop to do something else to make sure her family's going to be taken care of, whether that's literally fixing a, casserole or alerting other people needing childcare, whatever. So I think there's a variety of things that might contribute in both of those, both delaying the time when they actually, hit the door, if you will, but also what's been shown in all other literature is women getting interventions in less timely way than men.
So Chuck has an application that he showed us for individuals for awareness. should we make for the panel that application